Jake Morrison had been drinking his morning coffee when everything changed forever. He worked at the International Space Monitoring Station, a place where people watched the sky for dangerous objects coming toward Earth. It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday morning in March, but the alarms started screaming at exactly 7:42 a.m. Jake dropped his coffee mug and ran to the main control room. The screens showed something impossible. 3 enormous ships had appeared near Earth without any warning. They were huge, bigger than anything humans had ever built. Each ship looked like it was made of crystal and metal mixed together, shining, bright in the sunlight like giant diamonds floating in space. "Sir, they just appeared out of nowhere," said Lieutenant Betty Cole from her computer station. Her voice was shaking. No energy readings before they showed up. No signals. Nothing. Jake stared at the screens. In all his 20 years of watching space, he had never seen anything like this. The ships were beautiful but scary at the same time. They were just sitting there, waiting. Not moving toward Earth, not moving away, just waiting. Dr. Lisa Carter rushed into the room 15 minutes later. She was Earth's best expert on the possibility of alien life. Her brown hair was messy, and she was still wearing her pajamas under her lab coat. She had driven to the station as fast as she could after getting Jake's emergency call. "Are they real?" she asked, looking at the screens with wide eyes. "As real as you and me," Jake replied. "And they're not going anywhere." Around the world, governments were panicking. The president was in an emergency meeting. The military was preparing for the worst. Television news was showing the same pictures over and over again, while reporters tried to explain what no one understood. Then something even more surprising happened. Small ships started coming out of the big ones. These smaller ships were about the size of a city bus, and they moved through space like fish swimming through water. They headed straight toward Earth. "They're coming down," shouted Betty from her station. "Multiple ships entering the atmosphere." Jake grabbed the red phone that connected him directly to military command. "This is Morrison at Space Monitoring. We have alien craft entering our atmosphere. I repeat, we have confirmed alien contact." The smaller ships didn't land in empty fields or hidden places like in the movies. Instead, they came down right in the middle of big cities. One landed in Central Park in New York. Another landed near the Eiffel Tower in Paris. A third one came down in Tokyo's main square. All over the world, the alien ships were landing in places where millions of people could see them. Dr. Carter watched the news reports coming in from around the globe. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "If they wanted to invade, they would land in secret. If they wanted to talk, they would contact our governments first. This breaks every rule we thought aliens would follow." The ships that landed were beautiful up close. They looked like giant pearls that had been carved by the most skilled artists in the universe. They glowed softly with their own light, and they made no sound at all. Crowds of people gathered around each landing site, but the ships remained closed. Then, exactly 1 hour after the first landing, doors opened on all the ships at the same time. The beings that came out were unlike anything humans had ever imagined. They were tall, about 7 feet, with long arms and legs. Their skin was light blue and seemed to glow from the inside, like light was shining through colored glass. Their eyes were large and dark, taking up much of their faces. They moved with grace, as if they were dancing instead of walking. The alien who came out of the ship in New York walked slowly toward the crowd of people. He was wearing something that looked like a robe made of silver water. In his hand, he carried a small device that began to speak in perfect English. "People of Earth," the device said in a calm, pleasant voice. "I am Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian people. We come to you in peace, but we bring grave news. We have broken our most sacred laws to be here. We can never return to our home among the stars." The crowd was silent. Even the police and soldiers who had surrounded the area stopped moving. Everyone was listening to the first alien ever to speak to humanity. "We have violated the great protocol of our galactic society," Veltar continued through his translation device. "This protocol forbids advanced species from interfering with developing worlds like yours. But we could not stand by and watch your world die." Dr. Carter was watching this on television from the monitoring station. She grabbed Jake's arm. Did he just say our world is going to die? Commander Veltar raised his long, graceful hand, and the crowd became even quieter. There is something coming toward your world. A great danger that destroys everything in its path. We call them the Devourers. They are machines that eat entire planets, turning everything into more of themselves. The alien's large, dark eyes seemed to look directly into the television camera. We studied your species for many years from far away as our laws required. We learned about your history, your wars, your art, your dreams. We saw something in humanity that we had never seen before. You do not give up, even when everything seems hopeless. You find ways to win when winning should be impossible. Jakes felt a chill run down his back. This was really happening. Aliens were real and they were standing in cities all over Earth, warning humanity about some terrible danger. We made a choice, Veltar said. We chose to break our laws and come to your world to warn you and to help you. Now we are exiles. We can never go home, but perhaps together we can save your world and find a new home among your people. The alien commander bowed his head slightly. We are no longer the Zephyrians of the distant stars. We are your guests now, and we hope in time we might become your friends. The danger comes, but it will not find Earth defenseless. We will face it together. As Veltar finished speaking, similar scenes were playing out in every major city on Earth. The aliens had come not as conquerors, but as refugees who had given up everything to help a world they had never visited, but had grown to love. 3 days after the aliens landed, Dr. Amy Thompson found herself in the strangest meeting of her life. She was sitting across from a Zephyrian scientist named Keithera in a hastily built conference room at the United Nations building in New York. Amy was a quantum physicist, someone who studied the smallest parts of the universe and how they worked. She never thought she would be using her knowledge to talk with beings from another world. Keithera was smaller than Commander Veltar, but her blue skin glowed brighter. She had markings on her forehead that looked like silver tattoos, and when she spoke through her translation device, her voice sounded like music. Dr. Thompson, Keithera said, we must show you something that will be difficult to understand. Your species is very young, but you have something that older species have lost. Amy leaned forward in her chair. Around the table sat other human, scientists and military leaders, all trying to make sense of what was happening. General Paul Carter, a tough man with gray hair and serious eyes, was taking notes on everything the aliens said. What do we have that you don't? Amy asked. Keithera touched a device on her wrist, and suddenly the room filled with light. But this wasn't ordinary light. It created pictures in the air like a movie playing all around them. Amy gasped as she saw images of space, planets, and civilizations that looked nothing like Earth. This is our galaxy, Keithera explained. There are millions of worlds with intelligent life. Most species follow the same pattern. They grow up, they build cities, they learn to travel between stars, and then they become very organized and logical. The pictures changed to show beautiful cities made of crystal and metal floating in space. Ships that looked like works of art moved between planets. Everything looked perfect and peaceful. But there is a problem with becoming too organized, Keithera continued. When everything is planned and logical, you lose the ability to think in new ways. You become predictable. General Carter looked up from his notes. And that's bad because the pleasant images disappeared, replaced by something horrible. Amy saw darkness spreading across space like spilled ink. Where the darkness touched, planets became gray and lifeless. Beautiful cities crumbled into dust. Because of them, Keithera said quietly, the Devourers. The images showed machines, but not like any machines humans had ever built. These looked alive somehow, constantly changing shape and growing bigger. They moved through space in huge groups, covering entire solar systems like a plague. They were created by a species that no longer exists, Keithera explained. A species that made them to be the perfect workers. The Devourers were programmed to take apart everything they found and use the materials to build more of themselves. Watched in horror as the machines landed on a beautiful green planet. Within hours, the planet was covered in gray metal, The machines had eaten everything, trees, animals, even the air, and turned it all into more machines. Their creators tried to stop them, but it was too late, Kythera continued. The Devourers had learned to improve themselves. They became smarter and faster. They destroyed their creators, and then spread across the galaxy. The images showed world after world falling to the mechanical swarm. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years were wiped out in decades. Amy saw species that looked like giant butterflies, beings made of living crystal, creatures that lived in the oceans of gas giant planets. All of them fell to the Devourers. "Why can't you stop them?" asked Captain Steve Rodriguez, who had been put in charge of coordinating with the aliens. "Your technology is so much more advanced than ours." Kythera's large eyes seemed sad. "Because we think too much like they do now. We are logical and organized. When we fight them, we use strategies they can predict and counter. We have tried for thousands of years and we always lose." General Carter set down his pen. "So why come to us? We're barely out of the Stone Age compared to you." "Because you are different," Kythera said, and suddenly she sounded excited. "We have been watching your species for 50 of your years. We have seen your wars, your art, your sports, your movies. You do things that make no logical sense and somehow you succeed." The alien scientist touched her device again, and new images appeared. These showed humans throughout history. Soldiers winning battles they should have lost. Scientists making discoveries by accident. Artists creating beauty from nothing. "You call it creativity, intuition, thinking outside the box," Kythera said. "We call it chaos thinking. Your minds work in ways that cannot be predicted or copied. This is exactly what is needed to fight the Devourers." Amy felt a chill of understanding. "You're saying our craziness is actually an advantage? Your craziness, as you call it, is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy," Kythera replied. "The Devourers have defeated every logical, organized species they have encountered, but they have never faced a species that solves problems by being unpredictable." The images changed again, showing the solar system. Amy could see Earth, small and blue, surrounded by the darkness of space. But now she could also see something else. Far away, barely visible, was a cloud of gray dots moving toward them. "They will be here in 5 of your years," Kythera said. "Maybe 6 if we are fortunate. We have that long to prepare." General Carter stood up from his chair. "What do you need from us?" "Everything," Kythera replied. "We will share our technology, our knowledge, our ships. But most importantly, we need you to teach us how to think like humans. We need to learn chaos thinking." Dr. Amy Thompson looked around the room at the other humans. For the first time since the aliens arrived, she felt hope instead of fear. Humanity had always been told they were too emotional, too unpredictable, too chaotic. Now it turned out that those things might save not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. "There's one thing I don't understand," Amy said. "If chaos thinking is so powerful, why don't other species have it?" Kythera was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that changed how Amy thought about humanity forever. "Because most species lose it when they become advanced. They choose order over chaos, logic over intuition. They think it makes them better. We thought the same thing once, long ago. But you humans have kept your chaos, even as you reached for the stars. That is why you are special. That is why you might be the ones to finally stop the Devourers." The meeting ended with plans to set up joint research facilities around the world. As Amy walked out of the building, she looked up at the sky. Somewhere, out there, an enemy was coming that had destroyed civilizations older than human history. But for the first time in days, she wasn't afraid. Humanity's greatest weakness had just become their greatest strength. 2 years had passed since the Zephyrians arrived on Earth, and the world had changed in ways no one could have imagined. Dr. Kevin Lee walked through the halls of the new Joint Research Center in Colorado, passing rooms where humans and aliens worked side by side like old friends. Kevin was leading a team that was trying to build new weapons to fight the Devourers. Half of his team were humans and half were Zephyrians. At first, it had been difficult to work together. The aliens were very precise and careful about everything they did. Humans were messy and often changed their plans in the middle of projects. But slowly they had learned that these differences made them stronger when they worked together. In the main laboratory, Kevin found his research partner, a Zephyrian named Zartel. Zartel was tall like all his people, but he had learned to sit in human chairs and even drink coffee, though he said it tasted terrible to him. "Kevin, look at this," Zartel said, pointing to a holographic display floating above their work table. "The new shield design is working better than we hoped." Kevin looked at the display and smiled. The design showed a new type of energy shield that could protect spaceships from the Devourer's weapons. But this wasn't a Zephyrian design or a human design. It was something completely new that they had created together. "The Zephyrian energy patterns give it strength," Kevin said, "but the human modifications make it unpredictable. The Devourers won't be able to adapt to it quickly." This was happening all over the world. In hospitals, Zephyrian doctors worked with human doctors to cure diseases that had killed people for thousands of years. The aliens had medicines that could fix almost any problem with the human body, and humans had shown them new ways to think about healing that helped even Zephyrian medicine work better. In the military command center next to the research lab, General Nancy Brooks was having her daily meeting with Commander Veltar. Nancy was a tough woman who had been a soldier for 30 years. Veltar was still the leader of all the Zephyrians on Earth. Over the past 2 years, they had become close friends, even though they came from different worlds. "The new ships are almost ready," Nancy said, looking at reports on her computer screen. "We'll have 50 human Zephyrian joint crews by next month." Veltar nodded, but Nancy could tell he was worried about something. The Zephyrians had taught humans to read their emotions by watching the way their skin glowed. When Veltar was worried, his blue skin became darker. "What's bothering you?" Nancy asked. "Some of my people are having doubts," Veltar admitted. "They miss home. They wonder if we made the right choice by coming here." Nancy understood. The Zephyrians had given up everything to help Earth. They could never go back to their home planet or see their families again. Some days that must feel like too much to bear. "And what do you tell them?" Nancy asked. Veltar's skin brightened a little. "I tell them to look around. We came here as strangers and refugees. Now we have new families, new friends, new purposes. Earth is our home now." It was true. Many Zephyrians had formed close friendships with humans. They were fascinated by human culture, especially music and art. Humans were amazed by Zephyrian technology and their peaceful way of life. Children in schools around the world were learning Zephyrian language, and young Zephyrians were learning to play human games like basketball and soccer. But not everyone on Earth was happy about the changes. In his office across town, politician Richard Hayes was meeting with other humans who didn't trust the aliens. Richard was a tall man with angry eyes who believed the Zephyrians were lying about everything. "They say they're here to help," Richard told his followers. "But look how much our world has changed. They're taking over our governments, our military, our science. This Devourer story is just an excuse to conquer us slowly." Some people believed Richard, but most humans had seen too much proof that the Zephyrians were telling the truth. The aliens had shared all their technology freely. They had cured diseases and made life better for everyone. They never asked for anything in return except friendship and a place to live. Captain Maria Santos knew the truth because she worked with Zephyrians every day. She was the commander of the UES Defiance, one of the new ships built with both human and Zephyrian technology. Her crew was half human and half alien, and they worked together better than any crew she had ever commanded. "Take us to the training area," Maria told her pilot, Lieutenant Tom Garcia. Tom was human, but sitting next to him was Neltara, a Zephyrian navigator. They had become best friends over the past year. "Course set, Captain," Tom said. "Navigation." "Confirmed," Neltara added in her musical voice. "We will arrive in 12 minutes. Maria watched her crew work and felt proud. The Zephyrians had taught her crew to be more precise and careful. The humans had taught the Zephyrians to be more flexible and creative. Together, they were better than either species could be alone. In the ship's engineering section, Chief Engineer Danny Walsh was working with a Zephyrian engineer named Koleth to install new weapon systems. Danny was a short, stocky man who loved to fix things. Kolith was tall and thin, but he had learned to appreciate Danny's direct way of talking. "This connector doesn't fit," Danny said, holding up a piece of alien technology. "The specifications say it should fit perfectly," Kolith replied, checking his datapad. Danny grinned. "Sometimes specifications are wrong. Let me try something." Danny took out his tools and modified the connector in a way that wasn't in any manual. When he connected it, the system worked perfectly. Kolith stared at what Danny had done. "That should not work. You changed the design completely." "But it does work," Danny said. "Sometimes you have to ignore the rules to get things done." This was what made the human Zephyrian team so effective. Zephyrians followed rules and procedures perfectly. Humans broke rules when they got in the way. Together they found solutions that neither species could find alone. Dr. Lisa Carter, who had been studying the Zephyrians since they arrived, published a report about what she had learned. She wrote that humans and Zephyrians were perfect partners because they were so different. Humans were emotional and unpredictable. Zephyrians were calm and logical. But when they worked together, the combination was incredibly powerful. The report was read all over the world and even translated into Zephyrian language. It became the foundation for all future human-alien cooperation projects. As the third year of the Zephyrian presence on Earth began, both species had changed. Humans had become more thoughtful and precise. Zephyrians had become more creative and flexible. But most importantly, they had become friends. The Devourers were still coming. The countdown continued. But Earth was no longer the same defenseless planet the aliens had first found. It was becoming something new, something that had never existed before in the galaxy. A world where two very different species had learned to work together as one people. And deep in space, getting closer every day. The mechanical swarm had no idea what was waiting for them. Commander Tony Miller was staring at his computer screen when the alarm he had been dreading for 3 years finally went off. The Deep Space Monitoring Station on the edge of the solar system had detected something moving in the darkness between the stars. Tony's hands shook as he reached for the emergency communication device. "This is Deep Space Station Alpha," Tony said into the microphone. "We have confirmed contact with the Devourer fleet. Repeat, the enemy has been detected." Tony had been chosen to run Earth's early warning system because he was good at staying calm under pressure. But seeing the enemy for the first time made his heart race. The computer screen showed hundreds of dots moving toward the solar system, like a cloud of metal death. Next to Tony sat Neldana, a Zephyrian sensor specialist who had become his closest friend over the past 2 years. Neldana's blue skin was glowing brighter than usual, which meant she was excited or scared. "How many ships do you count?" Tony asked her. Neldana's long fingers moved over her control panel with incredible speed. "The computer estimates 3,000 individual craft," she said. "But Tony, they are not just ships, they are factory ships. They will make more of themselves as they get closer to your sun." Tony felt sick to his stomach. 3,000 enemy ships, and they could build more. Earth's combined human and Zephyrian fleet had only 200 ships. The numbers were terrible. "How long do we have?" Tony asked. 6 months until they reach the outer planets, Neldana replied. 8 months until they reach Earth." Tony activated the emergency broadcast system that would alert every military base and government on Earth. Within minutes, his message would reach Admiral Chris Johnson, who commanded Earth's defense fleet, and Zephyrian Admiral Tethamore, who served as his second in command. While Tony and Neldana continued monitoring the approaching enemy, Dr. Helen Clark was making an important discovery in her laboratory on Earth. Helen was a psychologist who had been studying how the Devourers thought and made decisions. Working with her was Morith, a Zephyrian who understood how different minds worked. "Look at this pattern," Helen said, pointing to a holographic display that showed how the Devourer ships moved. "They don't move randomly. There's a pattern hidden in what looks like chaos." Morith studied the display with her large, dark eyes. "Yes, I see it now. The larger ships follow predictable paths, but these smaller ships..." She paused, thinking. "They are giving orders to the others." Helen felt excitement building in her chest. Exactly. The Devourers have a hive mind, but it's not what we thought. It's not controlled by the biggest ships. The control comes from small ships that look unimportant. This was exactly the kind of discovery that only human minds seemed able to make. Zephyrians were very logical, so they naturally assumed the biggest ships would be the most important. But Helen's human intuition told her to look for patterns that didn't make obvious sense. If we can identify and destroy these control ships, Helen said, we might be able to cause the whole fleet to fall apart. Morith's skin glowed brighter, with excitement. This could change everything. We must tell the admirals immediately. Meanwhile, Admiral Chris Johnson was meeting with his command staff in the main war room at Colorado Defense Command. Chris was a tough man with gray hair and scars from old battles. He had been chosen to lead Earth's defense because he was good at making difficult decisions quickly. Around the large table sat both human and Zephyrian officers. They had been planning for this day for 3 years, but now that it was here, everyone felt the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. The enemy fleet is larger than we hoped, Chris said, looking at the faces around the table. But we have advantages they don't expect. Admiral Tethmore, the Zephyrian second-in-command, nodded in agreement. Tethmore was older than most Zephyrians, and his blue skin had silver markings that showed his long experience. Our combined tactics are something they have never faced before, he said in his calm, musical voice. Captain Maria Santos, who commanded the UES Defiance, raised her hand. Admiral, my crew has been practicing the new formation attacks. The Zephyrians handle the precise movements, and the humans handle the unpredictable strikes. It's working better than we hoped. Lieutenant Colonel Gary Adams, who led the fighter squadron, agreed. The enemy expects logical attacks they can predict and counter. Our chaos tactics should confuse their computer minds. But even as they planned their defense, something unexpected was happening throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrian sacrifice to help Earth had become a story that other alien species were hearing about. For thousands of years, species had hidden from the Devourers or surrendered to them. But Earth was the first world to fight back with real hope of winning. Commander Veltar received the first message while he was meeting with General Nancy Brooks. The message came from a species called the Crystalline Collective, who lived on worlds made of living crystal. Commander Veltar, the message said, we have heard of your courage in helping the human world. We want to help too. We are sending 50 of our ships to join your fight. Nancy looked at Veltar with surprise. You never mentioned that other species might help us. Veltar's skin was glowing brighter than Nancy had ever seen it. Because I never imagined it would happen. For thousands of years, every species has faced the Devourers alone. No one has ever asked for help or offered help. This is something completely new. Over the next few days, more messages arrived. The ethereal swimmers, who lived in the gas clouds around giant stars, were sending 30 ships. The rock eaters, who lived inside asteroids, were sending 20. Even some species that the Zephyrians had never heard of were coming to help defend Earth. Dr. Lisa Carter was amazed when she studied the reports. It's like Earth has become a symbol, she told her research team. The Zephyrians broke their laws to help us, and now everyone wants to be part of something that might finally stop the Devourers. Captain Roy Thompson, who flew the experimental fighter called Wildcard, was practicing with his mixed human and alien squadron when the first Allied ships arrived. Roy was known for being the most unpredictable pilot in the fleet, which made him perfect for confusing the enemy's targeting computers. Look at that, said his wingman, pointing to a ship that looked like it was made of pure light. That's an ethereal swimmer ship. I never thought I'd see one in real life. Roy grinned inside his helmet. Get used to it. We're not just defending Earth anymore. We're defending the idea that the Devourers can be beaten. As the weeks passed, the Allied fleet grew larger. Ships arrived from across the galaxy, each one bringing new technologies and new ways of thinking. The human ability to work with anyone and adapt to anything made Earth the perfect place for this strange alliance to come together. But the Devourers were getting closer. Every day, Tony Miller's sensors showed them moving deeper into the solar system. They had reached the orbit of Neptune and were beginning to spread out. preparing for their final attack on Earth. The battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy was only weeks away. On one side was the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled, machines that had destroyed civilizations for thousands of years. On the other side was the strangest alliance the galaxy had ever seen, led by a young species that refused to give up, and aliens who had sacrificed everything to help them. In command centers around Earth, both human and alien officers made their final preparations. They had new weapons, new tactics, and new allies. But most importantly, they had something the Devourers had never faced before: hope, friendship, and the crazy human belief that any problem could be solved if you just refused to quit. The storm was almost here, but Earth was ready to meet it. The battle began at dawn on a Tuesday morning when the Devourer fleet reached Mars. Captain Roy Thompson was flying his fighter Wildcard at the front of the Human-Alien Alliance when he saw the enemy for the first time with his own eyes. They looked like a disease spreading across space, gray metal ships that moved and changed shape like living things. "All fighters, this is Wildcard 1, Roy said into his radio. "Remember what we practiced. Stay unpredictable. Don't let them figure out your pattern." Behind Roy flew 50 other fighters, each one piloted by humans and aliens working together. His wingman was a crystalline pilot named Shardith, whose ship looked like it was made of living diamonds. Together, they dove toward the advancing enemy fleet. Roy started flying in spirals and loops that made no sense to the Devourer targeting computers. Every time the enemy ships tried to predict where he would go next, he changed direction in ways that no logical mind would choose. Shardith followed his lead, and soon all the fighters were dancing through space like they were playing a game instead of fighting a war. "The enemy cannot lock onto us," Shardith reported, her voice sounding like crystal bells ringing. "Their computers are confused by your flying patterns." Roy smiled inside his helmet. "That's the point. Let's see how they like this." He aimed his ship directly at a large Devourer vessel and fired his weapons while spinning like a top. The enemy ship tried to shoot back, but Roy's crazy flying made it impossible for their computers to hit him. Meanwhile, Shardith used her precise crystal weapons to hit weak spots that Roy's wild flying had revealed. Far behind the fighter battle, Admiral Chris Johnson watched the fight from the command ship UES Unity. Next to him stood Admiral Tethmore and representatives from a dozen alien species. The command center looked like something from a dream, with beings of light, crystal, and metal all working together. "The fighters are doing well," Tethmore reported, "but the main fleet is still approaching Earth." Chris nodded grimly. The fighter attack was just the beginning. They needed to find and destroy the control ships that Dr. Helen Clark had identified, but first they had to get close enough to the main fleet. "Send in the Chaos Squadrons," Chris ordered. Lieutenant Colonel Gary Adams led his squadron of mixed human and alien pilots in an attack that looked completely insane. Instead of flying in neat formations like military pilots usually did, they spread out and attacked from every direction at once. Some flew straight up, some flew sideways, some even flew backward while shooting. The Devourers had never seen anything like it. Their computer minds were designed to respond to logical attacks, but there was nothing logical about what the humans were doing. Some human pilots were flying patterns that looked like they were doodling in the sky, while their alien partners provided covering fire with surgical precision. "This is Blue Leader," Gary radioed to his pilots. "Remember, if what you're doing makes sense, you're doing it wrong." His pilots laughed and made their flying even more random. One pilot named Sarah Bennett was flying figure eights while shooting at targets behind her. Her ethereal partner, a being made of gas and energy called Wispara, was flowing around her ship like smoke and hitting targets that Sarah couldn't even see. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Helen Clark's research proved correct. Dr. Sandra Foster, working from the command bunker deep inside a mountain, was using both human intuition and Zephyrian computers to analyze the enemy fleet's behavior. "I found them," Sandra shouted into her headset. "The control ships, they're the small gray ones that look like flying metal eggs. There are 12 of them scattered through the fleet." Working with her was Kelton, a Zephyrian strategist who had learned to appreciate human leaps of logic. "The pattern is clear now," Kelton said. "Each control ship manages approximately 250 other ships. If we destroy them, The whole fleet falls apart, Sandra finished. But they're protected by thousands of other ships. How do we get to them? The answer came from the most unlikely source. Captain Maria Santos, commanding the UES Defiance, had an idea that was so crazy it just might work. "Admiral," Maria radioed to Chris Johnson, "what if we don't try to fight our way through their fleet? What if we let them capture us?" Chris almost choked on his coffee. "Explain that, Captain." "The Devourers always try to capture and study new technology," Maria said. "If we let one of our ships get captured, but rig it to break free at the right moment, we could get right into the heart of their fleet." It was the kind of plan that only a human would think of, and only someone with Zephyrian technical skills could make work. Admiral Tethmore was quiet for a moment, then said, "It is completely illogical. The Devourers will never expect it. I think it might work." Maria's ship, the Defiance, volunteered for the dangerous mission. Her crew included humans like Chief Engineer Danny Walsh and Zephyrians like Neltara the Navigator. They disabled most of their weapons and flew straight into the middle of the enemy fleet, pretending their ship was damaged. Just as predicted, the Devourers captured the Defiance instead of destroying it. They pulled it into the center of their fleet, right where the control ships were located. The mechanical beings began scanning the ship, trying to understand its technology. "Now!" Maria whispered to her crew. Danny Walsh activated the hidden systems they had installed. Suddenly, the Defiance came back to life with full power. But instead of trying to escape, they started attacking the control ships from point-blank range. "Control Ship 1 destroyed," reported Lieutenant Tom Garcia from the weapons station. "Control Ship 2 destroyed," added Neltara. The effect was immediate and amazing. As each control ship died, hundreds of Devourer vessels stopped moving. Without their central coordination, the mechanical fleet began to fall apart. Ships crashed into each other or flew off in random directions. But the Defiance was trapped in the middle of thousands of angry enemy ships. Maria knew they might not make it out alive, but they had done their job. "All ships, this is Admiral Johnson," came the voice over the radio. "The control ships are exposed. All units attack now." The entire Allied fleet rushed forward to help the Defiance and destroy the remaining control ships. Roy Thompson led his fighters in a wild charge through the confused enemy fleet. Gary Adams and his Chaos Squadron spread out to attack multiple targets at once, but it was the combined effort of all the different species that won the day. The crystalline ships cut through enemy hulls with beams of pure light. The ethereal swimmers flowed through space like living clouds, hitting targets from impossible angles. The Rock Eaters, whose ships looked like flying asteroids, smashed into enemy vessels with incredible force, and the humans did what humans did best. They improvised. When their weapons ran out, they rammed enemy ships. When their ships were damaged, they used the wreckage as weapons. When nothing else worked, they tried something that had never been done before. The last control ship was destroyed by Captain Roy Thompson, who flew his damaged fighter straight into it in a kamikaze attack. But he ejected at the last second and was rescued by Shardith, who caught his escape pod with her crystal ship's tractor beam. As the final control ship exploded, the entire Devourer fleet shut down. 3,000 mechanical ships that had seemed unstoppable just floated dead in space. The threat that had terrified the galaxy for thousands of years was finally over. In the command center, Admiral Chris Johnson and Admiral Tethmore watched in amazement as victory reports came in from across the fleet. They had lost some ships and brave people had died, but Earth was safe. More than that, the galaxy was safe. "We did it," Chris said, hardly believing it himself. "No," Tethmore replied, his blue skin glowing brighter than ever. "You did it. Humanity showed us that the impossible is just another problem to be solved." News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light. Species that had hidden from the Devourers for thousands of years emerged from their hiding places. The mechanical plague that had destroyed so many worlds was finally gone, defeated by the strangest alliance in galactic history. Commander Veltar stood with General Nancy Brooks on the observation deck of their space station, watching the disabled Devourer ships being towed away for study. Earth had not only survived but had become the center of a new galactic community. "So what happens now?" Nancy asked. Veltar smiled, an expression he had learned from humans. Now we rebuild the galaxy, and this time we do it the human way, with hope, friendship, and just enough chaos to keep things interesting. The war was over, but the real adventure was just beginning.